Well, welcome to the JC podcast. Welcome back, a place where we get to explore and unpack life in a confusing and fast changing world. I'm your host, James, and this is the second episode for the JC podcast. It's a bit of a passion project of mine, being able to, just discuss life topics with the intention to also, hopefully invite some guests on here to just hear their wisdom and experience so that we can hopefully be better equipped to live this life. A bit about myself, if you're new to this podcast, my name is James. I'm 30 years old. I'm single as well. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I've been a pastor for just over 5 years, and I have been overseeing the youth and the young adults as their pastor at my church. I'm currently on a sabbatical, 6 months, so I'm currently 2 months into my 6-month sabbatical, coming from burnout. And so just taking the next few months to just rest, to just recover, but to also explore some passions, which includes this podcast as well. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. In the last episode, which was our first episode, we explored a bit about my online dating experience, also comparing the different dating platforms. So, of course, you have Tinder, you've got Coffee Meets Bagel. We also touched on Hinge as well. And we also touched on different approaches to online dating that people take to online dating. Some people, just like to use it to just, meet new people, to just kind of, I guess, your typical, have like one-off flings or whatever it is. Some people look very seriously for a future partner. Some people just want to date and see where it goes. And so we touched on that. And then we also touched on my approach. And we also touched on whether online dating is for everybody. So if you haven't listened to it, encourage you to go back, listen to that first episode on Spotify or Apple Music, depending on Apple Podcasts. Today, it's going to be a bit of a shorter one. And it's going to be like the part 2 to what we talked about in the first one, and just kind of going to talk about key lessons that I learned from online dating or even just dating. So this definitely does apply to just dating as well. Now, I'm pleased I'm no expert in dating, but I just want to share my experience in hopes that I think it may be helpful to somebody out there. So there's kind of lessons that I learned, and I'm a very structured person, so I've got 5 lessons that I learned from online dating/dating. So I guess the first lesson that I learned was that it pays to be intentional during the initial online chats. All right. So if you ever done online dating, when you match with someone eventually, you chat with them, right? And then usually it's the guy to make the first chat, but not always. But I think it pays to be intentional during that online time. Now, some people I know, they just kind of like get it really quick out of the way and just say like, hey, did you want to just meet up for a coffee or whatever, and do most of the bulk of the work in person. But for me, I think I preferred the approach where I was more intentional with the online chat. And for me, online chatting is a bit easier, but I understand it doesn't come as natural for a lot of people, but I think it pays. So my approach has always been to get to know a few key things about them during these initial online chats before moving to an in-person date. So the things that I look for, right? This is not an exhaustive list, but these are the things that I look for. So what do they currently do for work and study? I mean, this is besides the small talk, like, how was your weekend and all that stuff, right? Do they have general hobbies or interests, and what are they? And, are they vastly different from mine? Which church do they go to? I'm a Christian, and that's really important to me. And so I want to know, which church do they go to? And is it a church that is, I guess, safe, to be honest? Or like, are they from a cult, or like whatever it is, right? Just practical stuff. And also shows which denomination they're from. And that may be a big thing for you as well. So maybe, that could be a thing. Do they serve in their church? For me, I want someone who is very servant-hearted, I think that's really important. Are they serving in their local church as well? Or if not in the local church, where do they serve as well? How do they see their faith, and what's their kind of faith journey? Now, I usually leave the big things like their testimony to like the in-person dates, but sometimes you can just kind of get a vibe asking a few kind of questions about how they see faith. Is faith really important to their life or not? And obviously, they would ask the same thing back to me, and they would realize that, I am a pastor. And so their reaction tells me a bit about them. And are they okay with dating a pastor? Because obviously, not a lot of people are. And I've met people online who have not been that open or that okay with it. And that's fine, But at least you get to know that quite early on. So if you have a profession that maybe, I don't know, controversial, I don't know what, nothing comes to mind, but it might be important to have that conversation before you go for an in-person date so that you don't, waste each other's time. And the last one is, what do they look for in a partner or a spouse? And that also helps to field whether, it's worth investing into an in-person date, because obviously that takes time, takes money. And so these are just some of the things. So it pays to be intentional during these initial online chats. That's just my preference. I know some of you don't like to do that, but that's just me. So the second lesson I learned, so that was first. Second lesson is every desirable trait has its pros and cons. Okay, so every desirable trait has its pros and cons. So going into online dating, I was very, very intentional, right? Having previously thought about the kind of person that I would want to marry, thinking about the values that the person has, the certain interests, are my interests and their interests, a certain character as well. And so like for me, for example, I was like, I want someone who's kind-hearted. I want someone who is servant-hearted, as I said, who is hospitable, these kind of things, right? However, what I thought I really wanted, so these values, they're good values, they actually have a flip side to it as well, right? So when you're dating and you're wanting something specific, like a valuable or a trait, there's a pros and cons to it. So for example, if you want someone, or if you desire to be with someone who's very easygoing, maybe that's a big thing for you, right? The flip side is that they're very likely not going to be structured, or they're not going to be organized, right? So a pro is like easygoing. Yeah, of course you want people to be easygoing and not so uptight. But then the flip side is that they're not going to be organized or structured. Another one is like, I want someone who's very gentle, very, very, calm and quiet spirit, The flip side is that they may not be outgoing or, extroverted. And so if you love to, be extroverted, you love to connect and to fellowship with people, that might be a flip side for this person, right? That you might struggle in the relationship if you do end up in one. So for me, I had to learn and I had to realize this while I was, dating, because I went into thinking that, dating, that if I had this particular value or this particular trait, that they were going to be, such a great person, it was going to be awesome. Yes, I love somebody with that, not knowing that it does come with a flip side. And so I think I say that to say ultimately, I think you need to manage your expectations when it comes to dating, so that you may expect someone to be very, for example, I said very easygoing, and that's great, but you have to realize and manage the expectation that there's going to come with challenges too, right? They're going to be unorganized, they're going to be unstructured, and if you like to be organized and structured, that is something that you need to consider. That's not to say that it won't work out, but it's something to seriously consider, and to just not set yourself up for disappointment, because I think that's what happened with me when I went in with this idea that, I'm going to find someone with, X, Y, and Z character, and then realize that, that's not what I expected. And then that kind of throws a, what's that word? Not a grenade, but throws a curveball into your pursuit of this person and evaluation of this person. So manage expectations and have these desires, which are good, but also think to what extent. So I want someone who's easygoing, but to what extent? I want someone who's gentle and quiet, but to what extent? Because you have to always think about that flip side, right? So every desirable trait has its pros and cons. So that's lesson 2. Lesson 3, neglecting the importance of chemistry and vibe. Right, this is the third lesson, neglecting the importance of chemistry and vibe. Now, values and character, they're so important, right? They're so important, but you have to be able to get along with this person. Now, I'm not sure if you heard about this. There's a thing called the 3 C's. I can't remember exactly who came up with this, but think of it as like three circles, and okay, think of it as 3 circles that are in each other, if that makes sense. So one circle's in the next circle and the next circle. So the outer circle is kind of like your chemistry. Then the inner circle is like your character. And then the innermost circle is your core values. I think I didn't really explain it well for those who are listening. But essentially, your core values in the middle. The next circle out is your character. The next circle out of that is chemistry. And all three are quite important to making a relationship or even a marriage or whatever work, right? And although value and character is important, so characters like this, the inner and core values are important, but chemistry and vibe, if you like to use that word, is just as important, right? Vibes and chemistry is just as important, because at the end of the day, if you're looking for a life partner, can this person be your best friend? And can you spend the rest of your life with this person? And that's kind of what vibe is. Do you vibe with this person? Because it's not about can we always have deep chats, or can we always enjoy each other's presence, because there's going to be times where you will have to talk about the mundane day-to-day things, right? When life gets busy, when life gets stressful, it's going to be about just the mundane stuff. And you're going to have to spend your life with them and enjoy just being with them. Do you just enjoy their presence? Do you enjoy things about them? And for me, I kind of got bogged down by the values, by the character, and not and not realizing the importance of chemistry. Because ultimately, if you don't enjoy being with them or even spending time with them, then why think of values and character, right? Chemistry, the reason people put chemistry as the outer circle is because often that is the first thing that kind of brings you in to then get to know their character and their core. Now, I know it always doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you just get to know them by their characters and values, and then the chemistry comes. But you can't neglect like the chemistry without looking at So you can't essentially say you need to look at all three. So for me, it was not thinking so hard initially about the values and the opinions and the preferences and the convictions, and neglecting the chemistry. And because I think also values and opinions and preferences can change over time. People who have lived their lives as non-Christians can suddenly become Christians halfway. That's a huge core value that has changed. People change their sports teams. People change food preferences in their life, and so it can change. But often that change is there if you have that chemistry. If you don't have that chemistry, I think it's a bit hard to even consider that, right? So for me, I think it's so important that whilst you evaluate a person during dating, that to look at the chemistry, to look at, do I just love spending time with this person? Do we vibe? And the fourth lesson, so that was the third lesson. So neglecting the importance of chemistry and vibe. The fourth lesson is to just take it slow. Let it flow naturally. All right, so just take it slow. Let the relationship and the dating flow naturally. Now, I know this may not apply to everybody as advice, because some people's personalities are just naturally like this. They just very go with the flow. They very let's take it slow. But for me, I'm a very structured, organized, goals-based person, and so the need to be intentional. So I need to be intentional to just go with the flow more. So it's a bit weird. It's like be structured to be unstructured, plan to be go with the flow. And the reason I say this is because what can happen is when you if you end up taking the relationship very seriously, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's important to be intentional that, hey, eventually I want this to end up in a marriage relationship. I think that's very good to do that and be wise to do that, but to not rush it and feel like you have to, buy X amount of dates to reach this point. I think it's important to reflect and evaluate as you go along, but not putting that pressure on that other person. And I think I say this because, I think it can scare them off. It can give them extra or unnecessary pressure that they may not fit into that space. And so, for example, I'm a very structured and organized person. If I meet someone who's very easygoing, they might feel that, this is too structured for me. This is too, they might feel, constricted or just essentially not comfortable. And so I think just have fun, and really just get to know them as a friend first. I know that's hard when sometimes you're being intentional and you have, and you're starting to have feelings for this person. But just be chill and just enjoy that time with that person and really get to know them without having to think, oh, are we moving on to the next step? Or how do I go from here to here? To just really let it flow naturally as much as possible. All right. So don't overthink the process and where you guys are at. Just take it slow and let it flow naturally. That's lesson number 4. And the final lesson, which is lesson number 5, it's good to take a break sometimes. So what do I mean by that? So let's just say you've, and this is more specifically for online dating and using the app, but I think it definitely applies to dating in general. But yeah, I think when you use the app and then you go on a few dates, but it didn't turn out, and then you go back on the app, if that keeps happening and that cycle keeps repeating, you can definitely get burnt out from dating and from using the app. The app is very similar to social media in the sense that there is like a dopamine kick. There is something happening to your brain, every day, especially for Coffee Beans Bagel. If you guys have used the app before, 12 noon is the time because that's when you get your next set of recommendations, right? And so there's this thing associated with like, it's almost like it's like a game that you're trying to find something new, or you're trying to get an excitement like, oh, did anybody like me, or who can I see? And I think when you get drawn into that, I think it can be quite unhealthy, and you may end up getting to a point where you become very discontented with your singleness. And that has happened to me before. And so, I'm currently on a break right now, but I have previously taken breaks many times, actually, throughout the past year and a bit that I've done online dating. And they have been very necessary and very good times for me to just kind of put that app aside and just take a breather and not feel that I have to keep trying to strive to find a relationship. Because I think every time you like somebody and they don't like you back, it just reinforces the idea that, nobody likes me, or if you may be thinking that, or, like I'm going to be alone. And so I think it's sometimes very healthy to just take those breaks. Now, I'm currently on a break from the app. And so what that means is that I'm not looking at, like I deactivated my profile so no one can view my profile, and I've uninstalled the app. So it's not something that I'm looking or touching, on my phone. And that has been helpful for me because, I got to a point where I was very discontented with my singleness, and I was like, I'm not happy with this. I need to, I'm just feeling sad, And so that was really important. But it doesn't mean that I'm not being intentional. So in my day-to-day, if I happen to meet somebody, it's not saying so I'm not dating at the moment. That's not where I'm at. No, I understand some people may be there, but that's not for me, right? For me, it's just I'm not being intentional with the application at the moment. But hey, if someone comes along, then sure, great, So yeah, I think it's important it's good to take breaks sometimes, especially if you've, gone through a few dates and hasn't been successful, or even you haven't even gone on a date, and each time things aren't working out. It's good to just take a break, and you don't need to put a time limit on it. Don't need to say, oh, I'm taking a break for 2 weeks or a month. Just take a break and just see how you feel. And if you feel like going back, then yeah, go back. But yeah, don't feel like, it has to be a week or a month or 2 months, whatever. To me, I'm not putting a date on it. I'm just whenever I feel like if I want to go back, I'll go back. If I don't feel like going back, that's fine too. So don't put that pressure. So 5 lessons. Pays to be intentional during initial online chats. Number 2, every desirable trait has the pros and cons. Number 3, neglecting the importance of chemistry and vibe. It's really important to make sure that you have core values, character, and chemistry as you consider. And number 4, take it slow, let it flow naturally. Don't force anything. Don't think so hard about progression. And lesson 5, it's good to take a break sometimes. So that's it for this episode. I really hope that these 5 lessons have been helpful for you. And yeah, I just really wanted to share my experience with, dating and online dating as well. But yeah, this concludes the podcast for today. Thank you so much for listening. I really do hope it has been insightful and entertaining. Especially, I'm just, just trying and starting this podcast out. So just seeing where it goes. Next episode is going to be on finding contentment in singleness. It's something that I think flows really well with, the past 2 episodes. But I think it deserves its own little episode by itself. So finding contentment in singleness, it's something that I have talked about before. I've preached about it. And so I think that there's some value there. As always, if you think that this podcast, this episode would benefit someone that please do share it with them. If you would like to hear and want to follow us, hear more about us and follow us on this journey, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening this on. If you have any feedback, testimonies, or even requests for future episodes and topics, you can email me at jameschia.ministries@gmail.com, or you can DM me on Instagram @_James Chia. Ultimately, my prayer is that this podcast will be able to bless people, to help them through navigating their young adult years. And so I appreciate any support and any feedback that you can give me. This has been the JC Podcast. I hope you have a blessed week ahead. God bless, and I'll see you guys in the next one.